Welcome to the Premier Mindset by Premier Performance LLC. I'm your host, Trent Mailer, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and performance coach, and this is episode 67. Today's a little different as we're going to jump into an interview, and we're going to start off with a question. So, our interviewee today, Max, what's the biggest thing you think people misunderstand about coaching young athletes today?
So, great question. What I notice, especially with people come up to me asking about this specifically, is they're saying, well, are the athletes different? Are the kids different? In a way, they might be. I mean, maybe we're just getting older and the kids are the same, but it's not only the kids that have changed, it's the environment they're growing up in. So when we were growing up, yeah, we had some video games, we had other interests, but now these kids are growing up where there's instant things that can grab their attention and you got to keep it. So not that the kids are much changing, but I say the environment they're growing up is changing. Parenting also is, I've noticed, a big difference. Not being held as accountable might be what I'm noticing with a lot of athletes nowadays. Kids not showing up as often, getting away with missing practices, not staying accountable at home. Parents are oftentimes taking the kids' side when it comes to, interactions between coaches, parents, and kids, and that triangle of trust between all three of us oftentimes getting broken. And it's just not a good communication setup. But yeah, so I would say it's not necessarily the young athletes of today. I wouldn't say they're much different. I would say the environment they're growing up in is very different.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something that not a lot of people really think about is how different today is from most of the time in the past. And just with the technological advances and just everything that they have at their fingertips nowadays is completely different from even when we were growing up or people long before us too. Like, it's one of the biggest shifts in human history, and I think people need to understand that. So I think that's an awesome point. How
Yeah,
do you
like
kind of manage that?
how we manage that is just always trying to be engaging, which kind of sounds like, you're up there kind of having to dance for them, but in a way it's not that. It's more like just getting on that personal level with the kids, showing that you're caring, always checking in, not kind of putting them off to the side. You got to kind of interact with all the kids. So I'm noticing the more years I do this, is your depth kids are the ones that you're really losing. Your stars are mostly going to stay around because they get that gratification, they get into it, they enjoy the sport, they're doing well. But those other kids, those depth kids that you might not have had as strong of a connection with, maybe when I first started coaching, when I was like a young coach. Now I've realized those are the ones I really have to leverage. I really have to talk to. I really have to make invested in this and show them that there is something for them in this. And lots of times, I've had conversations over the years where I've had athletes say, if I'm not going to get a scholarship, why am I doing this? And that breaks my heart a little bit because I'm like, I was a scholarship kid, and I was just like, I played football or I wrestled because I had the enjoyment of doing the activity. I liked getting better. I liked the discipline of it. I enjoyed getting coached hard by my coaches. I love being around my friends who played football, even if I wasn't some big star. Yes, I did play, but I had kids that come to me and just say, if I'm not going to play all the time, I don't want to do this. And that goes back to what I was talking about, where there's all these different things pulling at them that they can just go do. We're not the only game in town, no pun intended there. Like, when my dad was probably growing up, playing sports in high school was about as much fun as they could have. Now, with video games, social media, kids can go on YouTube for, hours at a time and find as much entertainment as they need. That's kind of whatever niche they want. So we kind of got to be more engaging for those kids that might not be at the top of our depth charts. So that's what I've found myself in recent years, really trying to leverage those relationships with those kids because you end up needing those kids. For last couple of years, we've kind of had low numbers and it's really affected us as a program, and we've had some turnover in staff recently. We got a new head coach, and that's kind of been our big push this year specifically, is trying to leverage those relationships, trying to make sure we're building these relationships with all the kids instead of just focusing on, those first 11 in, making sure we're actually talking and developing all the kids.
Yeah, That's awesome. And it's tough to be mindful about that because naturally you kind of default back to the ones that are getting that playing time because the eyes are on them the most. And to
Yeah.
kind of build that relationship with the depth and kind of have that be a support and a foundation for the team can be powerful, not to mention just investing into those, athletes themselves and what that kind of brings from it. So I think that's awesome. And I do want to dive into this deeper, but before we continue, I want to introduce my guest today before we keep going and give a little context for why this conversation is so important to me. So, me and Max, we've known each other for about 15 years. We first met playing high school football together, where he was a junior and I was a senior, and we spent years competing side by side on the field, and that friendship has continued long after our playing days have ended. One of the reasons he's the first guest interview on the Premier Mindset is because he's been one of my biggest supporters from the very beginning. Long before the podcast existed, he was encouraging me, supporting what I was building, and always told him that when I started bringing guests onto the show, he'd be one of the first people I wanted to have on. Since then, he's built an impressive career, as we've been talking a little bit, as an educator, coach, and mentor. He currently serves as a physical education and health and wellness teacher and is the offensive coordinator at Las Lomas High School. He's also spent years coaching football, leading wrestling programs, teaching strength and conditioning, and helping young athletes develop both on and off the field. What makes his perspective valuable is that he sits at the intersection of performance, leadership, education, and personal development. Every day, he works with young people, helping them build discipline, resilience, confidence, and character, skills that all matter far beyond sports. I'm excited for you all to hear this conversation because whether you're an athlete, coach, parent, leader, or someone trying to just improve their life, there are lessons here about growth, accountability, performance, and becoming the best version of yourself. So with that, before we continue, I want to just remind everybody this podcast is for education and performance growth. It's not a replacement for therapy or medical treatment. If there's something you need, make sure you go and get it. And on top of that, we have all of our social media accounts linked in the episode description, so go follow along in there as we continue to build things out. So now let's get back to the conversation. And something that kind of comes to mind for me is, what do you think football gave you that still affects your life today?
I mean, first things first, the relationships. We've been friends for, would you say, 15 years now?
Yeah,
I think all my closest friends have all been football players. Most of the guys I talk to are football players. Most of the guys I talk to every day are the guys I coach with. I mean, a lot of the players I still see that I used to coach, it's great interacting with them. It's just like with teaching. Some of the best experiences I have is the relationships you make. It's the interaction. It's the working with people, seeing them develop, and that's where you get the most enjoyment out of it. When a kid does something well, when a kid comes back to you after years and tells you how his life's going, and if it's going well, you get to, enjoy that moment with them. So I would say the relationships is the biggest thing I took from football. But obviously, there's discipline involved. Not that I'm like the most disciplined person in the world, but it does supply some amount of discipline. And I think I got maybe a little bit more of that from wrestling as well, with how disciplined you have to be, pretty good at that sport. You got to, the weight cutting, the diet, the constant practice, that definitely lots of discipline from there. A toughness level, just the ability to get through some certain things, just knowing that life does get harder, so just those little things, but that's basically what I think I've pulled away from my time playing sports and coaching sports is, the relationships, toughness, discipline, just those three main things.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think this is why there's so many people that are a huge proponent of sports growing up, because it does teach so many invaluable things you can't really learn outside of it unless you pursue it directly somehow. And
Yeah.
I think one of the awesome things with high level competition is how easy it is to bond with people around you and just kind of share almost like a brotherhood of like, these are my
Yeah.
people and they get it, because, people outside of it, they don't. And that's
No.
just the truth. Like, if you don't go through it, you don't understand it. And
No.
it's a
And
hard thing to show people.
yeah, and going back to what I was talking about, those kids that may not be the starters or the main guys, I had friends that weren't big stars. I mean, we have a wedding coming up for a friend of ours that he wasn't some big stud football player, but he made a great time of it. He built that relationship and that brotherhood with us. He went through it with us, and those are bonds that you'll have forever. If you put everything into it, if you stay in touch with your friends. Obviously, some people go their separate ways. I get that, but we've been pretty blessed, I think, that we've had this tight knit group of friends that we all developed those relationships in football. Obviously went to school together too, but in football, I feel like that's where it got as strong as it could be.
Yeah, and it's a great point with relationships. So many people want relationships, but they don't always want to invest the time and energy into maintaining them. It's like anything. You can have something great, but if you don't take care of it, it's a matter of time before it falls apart.
Yeah,
And there's great life lessons in that too, that we have to keep on working at things. We can't just
yeah,
stop and say it's good enough, whether it's a skill or a talent or an ability, or it's something we have going on in our life. If we take things for granted, they ended up just kind of falling apart and disappearing in time.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's with all this stuff, the kids just constantly harping on that as you let things go, they fade away, and you got to stay on top of what you got to stay on top of. And the, I think I had a couple kids, they've fallen out of football, and they were saying it, and I saw them because they worked for us. We run this flag football thing called Next Level, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not seeing my buddies anymore." I'm like, "Well, are you calling them? Are you texting them? Because in your guys' life, you're 16 years old. 2 weeks is a long time not to see your friends.
Hmm.
Eventually they're going to start going their own way. So
Yeah.
if you want that relationship, you got to work at it. And now you don't have football to fall back on. Now you can't just see him every day, and you're going to see him for 2 hours a day, or maybe 3 hours if we have a morning lift. Now you're outside of football. You got to find that time to spend with each other. So that it's unfortunate that that happens to these kids. When they don't have the sport anymore and they quit. But that's what I try to tell them. Like, you'll miss things you don't even know you'll miss. You'll miss practice. Like, I miss practice sometimes. I'll be like, some of the most fun I ever had was just messing around at practice.
100%. I agree. And, I think that kind of mirrors life as an adult a lot of times too, because, if you don't go out of your way and try and make that contact and engage with people, it is very easy for these things to kind of just drift away
Oh,
because you
yeah.
don't have situations where you're just sitting next to your friend in class or you're going to be next to each other in the locker room because you have practice later today. Like, it kind of forces you to engage, and then you
Yeah.
have to voluntarily do it. And a lot of people just kind of sit back and wait for the other person to do it. And you see so many friendships and relationships just fall apart because neither side wants to take the first step. And they're both kind of sitting there playing this waiting game when they both do want this relationship. And it just goes back to somebody taking that step and putting the ego to the side and saying, you know what, let me reach out and see if something could happen here. Let's go hang out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, putting that ego aside thing, especially, we have a friend in common that I didn't hang out with for a few years for personal reasons or whatever, but we'd always text each other and be like, "Hey, let's hang out. Let's do this. Let's bury the hatchet." And we just keep saying it like that, not putting any date on it, not doing a specific thing where it's like, "Hey, let's go do this and let's talk." And so it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back until finally we kind of were forced to see each other. I forgot what it was at, but we were in Reno. We sat down with each other for a good hour and a half, and we hashed it out. We talked about what we didn't love about what each other did maybe back in the day, and we buried the hatchet. But we needed that, like, kind of that activation energy to get us over that hump, to kind of push us forward. And it's good it happened, but maybe if that didn't happen ever, we wouldn't have made up. We wouldn't be friends ever again. So I get what you're talking about. Sometimes it's hard, and
Yeah.
just being that first person to just put down your guard and just go like, all right,
Yeah.
let's talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
taking that initiative and facing uncertainty in life is difficult, and I think we even see that in sports too. You've probably had athletes where you see them, just feeling like they're on point, doing everything right in practice, and then game time shows up, and for some reason it just falls apart. And you just have that moment where they're just not trying certain things. They're only doing things in practice they feel certain of. And then when the game shows up and the uncertainty and the chaos of it is there, then all of a sudden they can't just keep it safe and keep doing the things they're comfortable with. And they get pulled to places, they start to drown, and you start to see them start to flail in some really hardcore ways.
Yeah. I mean, in football you see that, but I would tell you in wrestling you see it just all the time.
Yeah.
Like, you'll have a kid, out on the mat at, practice, and he looks ready to go. He's one of your best athletes. I had a kid specifically, I'm thinking of when you said flailing and drowning, that I just popped into my mind. And he was one of my best wrestlers on the mat in practice. But when we get to tournaments, he'd get out there and then he would just freeze. Anytime things weren't going exactly his setup, he would set something up. If it didn't go exactly how he planned it, man, he would just freak out and just find his way to his back, and he'd just be like, "What happened?" It's just like, I don't know, I don't know. You could see it in his eyes, like he just freeze, and it was unfortunate, because he's a really good kid, but he just had that performance. I don't know if it's performance anxiety, but he just get to those situations and you tense up, and you just wig out. You'd be like,
Yeah.
dude, I've rolled with you in practice. I'm better than that guy. I mean, you can roll with me. But what's happening out there? And it's just like, I don't know, coach. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And it's just trying to work him through those. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get him past that. It really hindered his ability
Yeah.
to have a lot of success. I mean, not that he didn't try at it. He was one of my hardest workers. Like the kid ran on his own. He'd work on his own. He'd lift weights. He'd go to other practices with other kids to get better. And all I'd hear back feedback from coaches like, why isn't this kid one of the best wrestlers in the section? Like when he gets on the mat, it's just it all leaves him, and it sucked. But it does happen.
It
Yeah,
does, and I think that's a great point. I mean, this is the power of nervous system shutdown, and I mean,
yeah,
at the end of the day, you can't outwork your nervous system. Like you
yeah,
can work all day, you could train everything to the highest level, but if you can't show up and perform because the nervous system's going to shut down once you're overwhelmed, then it all goes offline. Because the biggest issue with high level performance isn't so much that we don't have the abilities and we need to learn new ones. It's we have them. We just need to get access to them. And kind of like what you're explaining with this wrestler, like he had all the abilities, he just kept losing access to it because that pressure moment really showed up and it just caused that constriction and everything started shutting down. And a lot of times I see that with athletes happening when they start attaching their identity to outcomes of who
yeah,
am I if I fail? Who am I if I
yeah.
can't do this thing? And I've even seen that with students too, students filling out homework but never actually turning it in because they're afraid not of doing the work but of getting the grade. Have you seen these kind of things where you see people doing the work but they're almost like shy or hesitant to put themselves out there in the spotlight for that moment?
Yeah, no, for sure. You see that all the time. It's just people afraid of failure. We had a football player like that. Amazing receiver, right? But amazing. Like I think he had two straight 1,000-yard seasons. He's one of Los Lomos's like all-time catch leaders, yards leaders, touchdown leaders, but couldn't play defense. And I would just be like, well, he's not afraid of contact. 'Cause you watch him play offense, he could block, he could stiff arm kids, he run through kids. So he's not a scared kid. And then, I'd ask him one day because everyone just was making fun of him, just like, oh, you can't play defense because you're weak, you're this, you're that. They said other words that I'm not gonna say, but all the stuff you'd imagine they'd say at football practice. And I'm just like, that doesn't sound like him, And I go talk to him, and I was like, what are you really scared of? And he said, failure. He said, I'm scared of missing the tackle. I'm scared that I'm going to go out there and make a fool of myself, because he's playing safety. There's a lot of open space. And if you're scared of failure playing defense, you're not going to make it. Like you're going to get got. Everyone gets got. That's just the way it is. And so like it is one of those things where like you have all the ability in the world, and it's just your fear of failure is just getting in your way of being an even better player. Because he was an amazing receiver, but could have been a great DB as well. I mean, he's at Purdue right now. He has a walk on, but I don't know how that's going necessarily. I haven't checked in with him for a while, but it is crazy that some of these kids, they just get out there, they have all the ability, they do all the preparation, and that fear of failure just really, takes them out of it.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, it's one of the traps out there, that trap of being good, because
Yeah,
you want to stick to what you're good at and you don't
yeah,
want to face new things and become kind of a beginner again, kind of like in this situation of like, I got to get into this and try something I haven't done. And yeah, I have the talent and the athletic ability, so I could probably figure it out, but I don't know. And a
yeah,
lot of people will shy away from that. And, I think that brings me to another thought, which I kind of got to ask, what's harder for you, playing or coaching? Because you went and did that transition from playing to coaching, which is something you hadn't done before, and trying to switch that role and go from a place where you had absolute control of what was happening in front of you to now you got to teach people and run people through things, and hopefully they figure it out.
yeah. I came to it, and I feel like I picked it up pretty quick though. I not to like toot my own horn or anything, but I remember I was lifting weights at Concord High, and Coach Hamilton, who was our head coach, he came up to me and was like, "Do you want to keep using the weight room for free?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was like, "Well, you gotta go coach the freshman football team." And I was like, "I don't know anything about coaching. I barely even. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about playing football, but in real terms, I knew very little." And I went out there, and after like a couple weeks, I just knew it was something I liked doing, and and that I was kind of good at. I kind of took to it pretty quick, and I rose fast. I was coaching freshman ball for like 1 year, and then when he left to go coach at Cal Berkeley, I replaced him as the O-line coach like the next season. So it was a pretty fast move. I mean, but probably playing was a little harder. Not that I don't want to say I had like performance anxiety, but I would say I probably did underperform a lot compared to where I probably could have been. Not as much in football, but definitely in wrestling. I
Mhm.
would say in a lot of big moments, I didn't quite wrestle up to my potential. And there's a myriad of different reasons for that, and not to get into all of them, but there was some personal stuff going on with that sport in particular with my dad. But
Yeah.
it's just there. I would say probably coaching. I've taken to a lot quicker. I think as a player I had fun and I thought I was okay, but I think I'm a better coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great that these things kind of find us in time. And, also the point you're making of, personal aspects getting in the way of athletic performance or just performance in general sometimes, that it's not just about abilities and capabilities. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the sport at all. And it's something else going on in our life, like relationships or school or work or whatever else we have happening. But these things all do impact us. Like we aren't operating in vacuums throughout our life. Like all of these things kind of leak onto each other through the days. Do you ever struggle with that with any of the players you're coaching and trying to get them refocused on what they're doing? Like they're just getting lost in their own life?
Yeah, and I was about to say that's often a refrain I have with other coaches. I'll be like, they're a 16-year-old, right? A 16-year-old boy that has maybe five other interests in their life. Maybe there's a girl involved. Maybe mom or dad, this or that, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa. Something might be going on, and a lot of times we forget about that because we just see them at practice, and we're like, well, this is what's happening at practice, so this is what this kid is like. And it's like, well, no, there's also school. There's a lot of things going on. And I feel like a lot of us just put them in this box. And we're like, well, this is what they're like at practice. This is all I need to know. And we're not learning about the whole kid.
Mhm.
And no, so I've tried over the years. I mean, when I first started coaching when I was like 19 years old, I was not worried about these things. But the more I do it, the more I realize this is how I can get, better relationships, maybe get better performance out of the athletes is if I learn about these things and help them through those as well, instead of just coaching them on football.
Yeah. That's awesome. It really sounds like through your career, you're honing in on just the power of relationships and just getting even better and sharpening your skills in relationship building. And you're seeing the impact of that, which is why over time it's continuing to lean more relationships than it is just technical skill. And I think that's powerful for people to recognize that relationships are what move the world in a lot of ways. Like to get somebody's buy-in, to get somebody to be willing to try something new or to trust in a scheme or a strategy or a plan, to work as a team together. Like you need to have those relationships built. And so many times people try and ignore that and avoid that and just take it for granted and just move forward. And it goes wrong a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like where I'm at, I'm not in a position to ignore that aspect.
Mhm.
I'm at a smaller public school, in the Bay Area. Football might be king at certain places. In Walnut Creek, it's doing okay. I wouldn't say it's great. If I ignore relationships, we're not going to have a lot of players. Just end all be all we won't, you
Yeah.
know. And so there's a logical reason where we need players, but then there's also the whole thing of I get more enjoyment out of it if I know who I'm coaching. I get more, for me, personal gain for me is I get to know who I'm coaching. I know who I'm helping. That gets me more invested. If I'm just coaching a bunch of people I don't know, I'm not as invested. I've gone through that before. I've had years and seasons where I felt like I didn't connect well with the kids. I didn't know the kids very well, and those were some of my worst years coaching I ever had. And I just didn't want to do that ever again. So I've really worked on trying to be better in that aspect because I don't want to get burned out on this thing. And I feel like if I keep working on these relationships, I think I can do this for a very long time and keep enjoying it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just the power of investing our time and energy into these things the right way. And, without purpose, it's really hard to continue stuff. And a lot of things start to go sideways, such as kind of what you've experienced on some of those lost seasons. So when you are doing this with these players and you are helping these athletes who can be struggling at times, like how do you motivate an athlete who may not believe in themselves? Like what do you do in those situations?
God, if you could figure that out. I mean, You know, every kid's different. I know that's a cop out, but trying to connect with them on whatever level you can, show them some success. Try to find what buttons to push. Some kids do need that kind of fire, rah rah, but other kids you just need to talk to on the side. And I've experienced that through the years. I've had kids that if I just calmly tell them what they need to do, they'll go out and do it, and they got the right motivation. Other kids, you got to bring the juice for them.
Hmm.
And I talk about that a lot, bringing the juice, right? Like sometimes I got to do it. I would like it if the players could do it. I'd like it if there would be a team captain that can bring the juice every day. Sometimes coaches got to bring it. When we experienced that, we had a few coaches that prod it.
Yeah.
They were pretty fired up. I have a strength conditioning coach in mind that we both had,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's just something that I've just found. Like if I just bring that momentum for them, sometimes they'll get going.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Sometimes we do have to kind of get the boulder rolling, and they can kind of take over from there and keep things going. It can be hard to get things started from just a complete stop, and every once in a while you get some players and leaders and team captains that are able to do that. But sometimes that is where the coaches come in. They kind of just lift things up, get things moving, and then just watch things roll from there. Yeah, these are some great points. And, I think one thing that does come to mind is, I know we talked a little bit about it kind of at the beginning, but it was more in a broad way. But what's the hardest thing about leading young men today?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot. I mean, I touched on the attention stuff, but maybe I should focus more in on the parenting stuff as well. I would tell you probably most of the coaches I deal with, the number one issue they bring up is parents. Like just being overly involved in the wrong way. Like, so not supporting your program, not being supportive of a staff, but instead being supportive of their own kid, just like trying to get the best for their kid, not the program. And we saw this year specifically. So last season, we tried to integrate a freshman football team. We haven't had one in years, which has been kind of bad. We've been losing numbers. So we've had just frosh off and varsity. So we're trying last year, okay, we're going to have a freshman football team. We're going to give a go at it. We didn't have enough sophomores show up, so we couldn't have a JV team again, but we had a frosh soft team. Every single freshman parent was, complaining, up in arms. This is a travesty, for the program. That was what their push that time. They're like, oh, this is for the program. We need this for the program, all that kind of stuff. They were pushing all the right buttons, saying all the right things. Didn't work out. Come around this year. We are doing it this year. There will be a freshman football team no matter what. We will
Nice.
not have a JV team though.
Hmm.
We're going to push that along.
Hmm.
And those same exact parents now are coming around and saying, well, my kid can't play varsity football. This is unfair.
Hmm.
We can't do this. Although last year they were, on board and they were all about the program. Now it's the selfish reason.
Yeah.
And I realized, that's just what I've noticed over the years. I mean, not that it's changed too much. I would say when I first started coaching, that happened as well.
Hmm.
But it's the selfishness of it that no one's really pushing program first anymore. It's just what can you do for my kid? Because honestly, everyone knows, looking at social media, what these kids are getting. I mean, down south in LA, in the LA area, like the amount of transferring is crazy. I know stories of kids that from up here that went down there, got houses paid for, parents got paid to go, to high school down there. And then they see all the NIL money. Now it's creeping into high school. It's turned into a very me thing. Same with the 7-on-7 stuff, and all the clubs and all that. It's just really kind of bled into the high school season, unfortunately. And I get it. This could just be me yelling into the wind, basically, because this stuff's coming no matter what. No one's going to stop it. The money's there. There's guys making money off these kids now. I mean, people always look at high school coaches like, oh, you guys are making money too. I'm like, you have no idea how little money we make.
Yeah.
It's a little embarrassing, but I could make more money if I just went and, flip burgers at McDonald's instead of, coaching these kids. So it's unfortunate, the parents getting involved in the way they are now, and just really pushing for their kid. And I agree with pushing for your kid. I think if you feel like your kid is getting wronged in a legit way, bringing it up to the coach first is definitely a way you can go about it if you're doing it in a respectful way and if you're willing to listen. Now, if the coach is going about his stuff in a wrong way and you feel that way, maybe you elevate it then to AD. But I've noticed, at least in my years at Los Alamos, we've had about 3 different coaches be let go, not from football specifically, where the parents didn't even go to complain to the coach. They went straight to the principal with a complaint, and some of them were ridiculous. It was, playing time related, which should never go to admin first. That's always a coach and parent conversation if you need to have it. I don't know what a principal can really weigh in on when it comes to playing time. They're not at practice. They're not there, evaluating the kids. But again, just coaching athletes nowadays with the parent involvement, where it's at and how it is, it makes it really difficult. And our last head coach, really what kind of ate away at him all season, his last season, was just the parents, just constant bickering, constant questioning. No, you're wrong. Have your questions, have your complaints, but there's ways of going about it, and I feel like when I was in school, if my dad had a complaint about how something was done, he would go talk to the coach and he would do it in a respectful way. But honestly, he would never do that anyway because he was a coach himself, and he was like, it's not my job to tell the coach how to do his job because I'm not signing up to coach football every day. Mm-hmm. So, just I feel like the parents need to understand they're signing up for football. They're signing up for the Los Alamos football team. They got to put some trust in us. If we go out of bounds in any way, yeah, go ahead. You can call us out. But I just feel like it's the first step now that immediately if anything goes wrong, it's there's blood in the water, and they're looking to get rid of you for someone else. And the other thing they don't realize is there's not a lot of guys willing to come coach high school football anymore. There's not a big cadre of guys waiting out there to come be the head football coach at Los Alamos High School. It's just not happening. It's not like when we were kids or maybe a little bit younger, or sorry, longer ago. There were PE teachers at every school that were high school football coaches, and now it's guys that are all off campus. It's a lot harder to get the jobs because you're not on campus, and there's just not as many people willing to do it. Mm-hmm. The long hours, summers, winter workouts, all that stuff for almost no pay. A lot of people don't realize it's just there's not as many guys out there trying to get this job. So, the parents might replace you or try to replace you, but there might not be anyone there.
Yeah, totally fair. And it is a huge commitment, and that's a testament to you and all the other coaches that put the time and effort and hours into this work to better these kids and help them, explore life and figure out more things about themselves while getting some athletic abilities and performances in. And I think that's really powerful. And I've seen these issues with parents too. I remember last season I was working on the sideline with a football team, just being a therapist there to help some of the athletes out whenever they'd struggle with stuff, and there was parents literally screaming from the bleachers at the coaches that their kid should get in, or why aren't they getting enough playing time. And it wasn't just like a little like yell every once in a while. It was like all the time, constantly obnoxious. It was cussing, it was yelling. I think it got to the point like the security had to literally throw them out. And like you're saying, like these conversations are important. We do need to have them, but there's a way to have them. And doing that, first off, isn't a conversation, and second, isn't going to get anything done. It's a team sport, and they may not understand why we're doing what we're doing, but if we could just sit down and talk about it, chances are everyone would probably feel better. It doesn't always work out, but it's just the better way to do it. And I think that is a huge point. And, going further with the NIL stuff and how that is leaking into high school, that is a great point, because not many people are thinking about that. They just view it in college. They think it's a cool thing, and they're just kind of stopping there. But they don't see that this is actually domino affecting down and trickling down into these high school programs. And sometimes even into like middle school, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, it's like insane.
It's intense, right? Yeah. And we need to figure out how to deal with these things and figure out a good path, because it is kind of like the Wild West right now. I'm even seeing that when I do a little bit of my work with the University of Nevada, that they're still trying to figure things out at the collegiate level, much less at the high school level, where in front of them they feel like they could do all of these things and get to these crazy big schools and then make all this money as 18, 17-year-olds, which is just a crazy thing that can happen in life now.
Yeah, it's insane. It used to be, the kids, their main goal was get the scholarship, right? Like go to a good school, get their scholarship. And don't get me wrong, I understand why we've moved towards the model of paying players. I'm not here to argue about that. Mm-hmm. What I'm just saying is there is a domino effect down the line, because now kids, that's just that little bit more incentive to make them want to change schools, want to, kind of get coaches out to get a new coach in that might highlight the kid more. It is putting more pressure and, turning the screws a little bit tighter on everything. And I just feel like it's unfortunate because that's not why I coach. I don't
Yeah.
coach to get kids the most money possible. And maybe I'm in the wrong there. I don't know. But it's just not what I enjoy. Don't get me wrong. We had an athlete that he went to, I think he was just at Virginia last year. I think he's at Washington this year. He's getting paid pretty good money to play corner.
Mm.
It's great. I'm happy for him. That's amazing that you can get paid a lot of money to play football in college. That's awesome. And he's got a kid, and that's going to help him raise his kid. That's amazing. It's life changing money if you manage it well. But it's just as far as high school athletes, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where I had some athletes say, "Why am I doing this if I'm not getting a scholarship?" And some kids are going to walk away from this and be like, "Why am I doing this if I'm not getting paid?" It's just unfortunate that might be the case at some point. And I hope it doesn't get to that point in high school. I don't think it will ever. But it is kind of weird that we're inching closer and closer to that being a case where kids are just so worried about the money at the end of this instead of just the process of doing this and enjoying it with their friends. Becoming more of a job than it is an activity, a fun thing I get to do with my buddies after school and as a community, right? Like that's what I feel like it used to be, at least when I was in school. We played, for Concord High. We were the Concord community, and we had Clayton Valley we had to go beat. That was the thing. We wanted to be good for each other. We want to be good for our families and good for the community. And now it's kind of like, yeah, well, whatever. I'm trying to get a scholarship out of this. I'm trying to be the best I can be. I'm trying to get all the all league honors and all that stuff. And that's cool and all. I'm happy if you get those, but for me, that's not what this is about. That's not what I'm aiming to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I noticed myself. When I did go to the University of Nevada to play football there, I mean, it wasn't the NIL era. It was still
Right.
just, the scholarship and the stipend and, NCAA rules and all of that. And,
Yeah.
that's its own set of conversation. But it did feel like a business. It did not feel
Yeah.
like high school felt. And I remember missing that almost immediately. So I was expecting it to just be like another experience of high school, but somewhere else with more people. And it was not that at all. Like I did make some great relationships and friendships and bonds and great memories and all these kind of things, but it was a very different thing. And I think that is something that we're starting to see kind of creep in to high school a little bit more, is people have different goals in mind, and it is becoming more transactional than it is like, hey, we're just here hanging out having a good time and this sounds like fun, so I joined the football team and I happen to be pretty good and you're pretty good too, so let's go make a run for it. And now
Yeah.
it is almost like I'm like angling my career to hit this payday to take care of my family, which is
Yeah.
important. And sometimes, some families
Oh
enjoy
yeah.
the goal, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's so many things we're missing out of. And I wonder if we can find a balance of trying to get both of those, and, I think we try and strike these balances a lot of times in practice and training and development as well. Like one of those things is like, how do you balance pushing athletes without like breaking them? Like, how do you
Yeah.
manage that line?
You know, Finding, and again, some kids can handle more than others. And that comes down to learning about all of them, learning what they are, learning what they're going through, learning what they can handle, and stress testing that. So not letting them stay where they're comfortable, but at the same time not taking them to the too deep water where they start drowning in it.
Yeah.
So it's all about incremental change, all about getting them to where they need to be, but you got to stress test them all the time. You got to, if you have an athlete that's doing really, really good at, with what you've given them, maybe it's time to start giving them a little bit more. And I can, as an offensive line coach, there's certain guys, where I'm just teaching sets today. You're not really good at pass setting. All we're doing is we're going a vertical pass set for you. Other kids, I'm going through how to, do pull downs, how to beat the hand, how to get better with different moves when guys are coming with different moves, and how to anchor better. Some guys, I'm just like, we aren't going to do that today. We'll get to that. So it's finding your athletes that can handle more and then giving them more, because that's how you're going to get more out of them. If you just keep doing everyone the same, and hey, well, these are drills we're doing, we're all doing the same stuff, and then at the same time, if you try to feed your athlete that can barely pass set all that other stuff, he's going to drown. He's not going to be able to use any of it. So you're just wasting his time. So it's about figuring out what all of them can handle.
Yeah, and it's an issue trying to treat everybody like a factory and just run people through the same thing, thinking that it worked for player A, so it should work for player B. But we're all different, we're all unique, and we have our own strengths and weaknesses, and we need to learn different things in different ways. And that's the power of tailoring things to people specifically. And
Yeah.
with kind of what you're saying, an idea or question kind of popped in my mind of like, what role does suffering play in growth? You know, we do talk a little bit about that push and trying to get to the grind aspect of things, but like what role does suffering actually play in development?
It kind of is where the development happens. I feel like if you're always doing great, or maybe you're just the best athlete ever, I don't know. But if you're always doing pretty good and you're never quite struggling and you're never quite suffering, I feel like you're not really putting yourself in those situations where you can grow. Not getting me wrong, you don't have to struggle and suffer all the time. I know some people are like that. They got to struggle, they got to grind every day, or every minute of every day. I'm not a proponent of that. I feel like you need to take time for yourself to just kind of relax and recoup. But
Mhm.
if you got to push yourself, and I see that as a coach. I could have just stayed a position coach. That would be really comfortable for me. I could do that forever and just be like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. This is easy. I can teach the same stuff forever. But I decided I want to be a coordinator, which is a whole other litany of problems you got to solve. First it was special teams, and I don't know if anyone else knows about high school special teams coaches. That ain't an easy job.
Nope.
You are not throwing out all the starters. You're throwing out those depth kids we were talking about. And that's when I first started realizing I needed to build those relationships with those kids, because I was talking to coaches. I'm not going to throw any names because I won't throw you under the bus. But, I'd be like, oh, I heard, so-and-so's not coming back. I'd be like, oh, we don't need him. I'm like, I do. I
Mm,
actually do need that kid. I
yeah.
would love to have that kid out here, because you know what he could be? He could be on kickoff. He's a fast kid. He could try, and I need that kind of kid. And, that's when I first started going like, I need to be searching for anyone and everyone. I'd be walking through the campus. I'd find any kid. I'd be like, do you want to play football? And I'd just start talking them up and talking them into it. And that's how I would get kids to come out for our JV team. I mean, our JV head coach would come up to me and be like, how'd you do it? I'm like, dude, we need people. Like at the end of the day, we need people. I'm finding more kids every day. That's what I love to do. I love going to talk to them. And even if they tell me no, it's not like I tell them like, oh, you can't handle this. You weren't built for this. It's not. There's no point in that, because you know what? They might be friends with someone on the team, and
Yeah.
I don't need them to go like, "Hey, your coach, he was talking crap to me." That's the other thing that I feel like a lot of coaches forget is these players have friends that are not necessarily on the team. So when you badmouth their friend that may have quit, how does that affect that player?
Yeah.
And I've seen it throughout the years. We've had players quit, and our coach has gotten in front of the team and just started bashing them and batting off on them. And I'm like, his best friend's sitting right there. I'm sure he's not taking that great.
Yeah.
So, you know, like going back to what we were talking about, yeah, just pushing myself, like that struggling, putting myself through it. Because I can tell you the first few times I had to get, a full team period together on offense, I was like, let's figure this out. I've never done this before. Now, don't get me wrong, I've experienced what team offense periods look like. I've experienced what group periods have looked like, but I've never ran one myself.
Yeah.
So the first couple of days, I was like, that wasn't good. But take notes, realize what you did right, ask other people. That's the other thing I've learned to do. I went up to my coach. My head coach, and I said, "What did you think?" And he told me what he thought I could get better. I asked my position coaches. That's the other thing. Don't just ask people above you. Ask people that might be one of your position coaches working for you what they thought. We have a friend Terrence who's my receivers coach, and I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, what do you think? What do you think we should be doing better? What do you think we should be doing differently?" And he's giving me his insight, and I'm taking it into account. And don't get me wrong, they might say stuff I disagree with, but at least I need to challenge what I thought with their thoughts so that I might grow. And that's part of the struggle. I can't just be happy in my own understanding and just go like, okay, well, I thought this went great, so we're just going to keep doing this all over again. Because if I'm being honest with myself, we recorded it. It wasn't a great day, right? There was a lot of errors on my part, on calling plays, getting formations set up. I mean, I didn't realize, before I started calling plays, like how much goes into that. And then after I did, I was like, okay, this is going to be a struggle for a minute. Don't get me wrong, I feel like I'm getting better at it, but that's because I put myself in that situation, and I'm willing to struggle, and I'm willing to listen to others about what they thought I struggled with.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's such a great strategy in life in general. Just being willing to get feedback and find feedback and go after that feedback. And as coaches, I think oftentimes people forget that it is a public facing role, that people are seeing you and how you handle things and what you do in tough moments and how you go about getting feedback and how you handle it, what you're saying when things don't go the right way. And if you're bad mouthing a player, all of these things do circulate. Like, you're not working in a desk where, maybe there's two people next to you and that's it. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter if they like you. Like, your public perception is going to directly impact the team. And if we lose sight of that, we can do things where we end up putting our foot in our mouth and we kind of set ourselves behind the eight ball and make things harder for no reason. Like, we got to be
Yeah.
aware of that and then just set up a great situation or setting where people naturally kind of want to attract to it, like a moth to flame.
Yeah. I call it like the unforced error, man. Like
Mhm.
just bad mouthing kids for no reason. I just don't get it. It's never been the way I've been. I don't see the utility of it. Again, bad mouthing a 16-year-old. I'm a 31-year-old man. I just I don't get it.
Yeah.
I've never understood it. It won't ever make sense to me. That's not when you get the best out of these kids. Even the kids I'm coaching, right? I'm not bad mouthing these kids. What's the point of that? What's the point of making these kids feel like they're bad people? Because for the most part, they're really good kids.
Yeah. And
They're coming out, they're trying something, they're spending their time with you. For the most part, again, there are some kids that have some issues, but they're the way I look at it, they're all pretty good on the whole. I mean, and I'm at a pretty good school where most of the kids that do come out for us, they have pretty good grades. They're doing pretty well in life. That all that kind of stuff's kind of checked. And for the most part, the personalities, they're all really good to be around. They're a good group of guys. But yeah, I guess when it came back to when I first started coaching, yeah, I was 18, 19 years old. I was like, you got to yell. And I was like, you got to yell all the time. Like, 'cause that's what coaches do. That's what my coach did, right? He yelled all the time, right? And that's what he did. And he'd belittle you in front of people. And that's just what he did. And don't get me wrong. I like the guy. I wish him nothing but the best. Me personally, that's just not what I wanted to do as a coach. I thought, like, why not just be a little bit more friendly to the kids? And obviously, I'm not their friend. I'm their coach. I'm mentoring them. But being friendly, making jokes, having a good time with them, showing them that this can be fun, that this can be a collaborative effort. I feel like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, God, which coach was it? I was at a seminar and he was talking, I think it was the Pittsburgh O-line coach, maybe University of Pittsburgh O-line coach. I could be wrong. It doesn't really matter. The important part is he never yelled at practice, like notoriously never yelled. Put dudes in the league all the time. Everyone would ask him, like, why he didn't yell. And he just said, well, growing up, I had some loud noises around me. Specifically, there was a train that went by my house every day, and it would wake me up initially. And then over time, I stopped hearing the train. Over time, it just became the background. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't want to become the background for my kids. I don't want to be the train just yelling at them all the time that they just tune out.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And I thought that was wisdom. I thought that was amazing, insight that if you just yell all the time, people just go, oh, that's coach, he's yelling. He just does that. Don't get me wrong, I can raise my voice every once in a while, but I feel like it's more effective, to illustrate that, something did go wrong and it is frustrating. And, football is a game of there's going to be frustrations. There's going to be times where you do need to yell a little bit to make sure everyone's kind of perking up, right? Like they're all like, oh, well, this is a moment I probably should be listening, because Coach Mayo yelled for the first time all year. But I feel like for the most part, conversational, just kind of tone with the kids, especially while I'm coaching, getting excited for them when they do something good and then taking them to the side and kind of telling them what they did wrong instead of belittling them in front of people. It's just kind of the coaching style I've gone towards. Personally, I just feel like that's what's effective for me.
Yeah, that's powerful, and I honestly love that story. I might steal it from you at some point with somebody. I like it.
It's not mine. It's University of Pittsburgh.
We'll both steal it from him then.
Yeah.
But with that, kind of thinking back over all these years and all these things you've learned and seen and seeing yourself growing and as over time and developing as a coach and a mentor and as a leader, what's something that coaching has taught you about yourself that really stands out?
I have the ability to be very patient with people. I feel like I've learned that from teaching as well. I teach middle school kids now, and I have other teachers that come to me and like, how are you so patient with them? Like, I don't know. I just remind myself they're kids and that they're going to make mistakes, and that for the most part they're trying their best, and I try to see the best in these kids. Not all of them are the best kids, and I understand that, but they have the ability to at least be a better version of themselves. And I feel like that's my job, is to find that better version of them and to try to help them find that better version of them that I can see and maybe they don't see. Yeah,
I love that.
right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, overall, I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on and talk with us about all these things and share your insight from what you've learned over all these years coaching and leading young athletes and young individuals and just watching them grow and develop into adults and just kind of the process that's kind of helping with that. It's great having you come on, and we'd love to have you back at some point to keep talking about these things. I really appreciate you coming out and just talking about this all.
Love being on it. Been a fan since day one.
Yeah.
Trimble's coming for me though. He's trying to like all the posts before me.
Yes.
I'm coming for him though. If he watches this, Trimble, I'm watching you, bro. I'm gonna like everything before you do now. I'm waking up early. I'm getting everything in.
I like it. The competition, it's roaring. So we're going to keep on going with this great interview. We're going to have more interviews coming up. Trimble may be one of those pretty soon. We'll see how that goes. Next week, we're going to talk about the nervous system of elite competitors, elite competition, what that looks like and how that goes. So thank you guys for joining us. It's great to see you all. I want you all to go out there, be the best you can be, push yourself and leave that comfort zone. And I will see you all next week as we continue with this all soon. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.